This is 99% Invisible. I'm Roman Mars. Up first is producer Joe Rosenberg. So, Joe, I hear you have a really good flag story for me.
Yeah, I do. And it's a flag story, which is one I kind of came across really accidentally. I was not trying to do work for 99PI.
But the work finds you.
But the work finds me. It really does. But no, what this story is a few years ago, a couple of friends and I in the Bay Area ended up checking out this little museum, actually not that far from the 99PI offices, called the Alameda Naval Air Museum. And the Alameda Naval Air Museum is, how to put this? It's one of those museums that is just kind of just made with love, right?
Yeah, and it's literally my favorite kind of museum, like a little museum devoted to one thing that you can take in all at once. I honestly, I love museums like this.
Absolutely. And so it is a museum devoted to naval aviation history. And so it has display cases with medals and ship models and mannequins with uniforms. There's like a DVD playing in a loop in one room. And so when my friends and I visited, we were, I admit, not planning to stay long.
Mm-hmm.
But then, just as we were about to leave, we came across this flag. And it wasn't even on display yet, but on that day it was kind of like in a frame on the floor, leaning against another display. But the second we saw it, we were all just like riveted. And what it was a Japanese flag, but not your normal Japanese flag.
Was it the rising sun flag with the rays coming out of it?
No, that's the Japanese military flag, of course, which is a whole other story. No, this one was the regular Japanese national flag, also known as the Hinamaru.
This is one with the red sun in the middle and the white field. It's kind of what you think of as the flag of Japan.
Exactly. Except on this Hinamaru, the white part of the flag was just covered in writing. And so I did what any person would do, which is I took a picture. And here, let me show you that.
Wow. Okay, so all these phrases written in what looks like kanji, like kind of radiating out from the sun. It's really lovely.
Yeah, and for the listeners who can't see it, this is not like a produced flag.
Right, it's handwritten, yeah.
Exactly. Handwritten calligraphy consisting of many different messages in all different hands written directly on the fabric. It seems as if maybe there's 50 or so people, maybe more, and they all have something written on it.
And do you know what it says?
Well, yeah, because it just so happens that one of the friends I was with, she was Japanese.
Oh, well, that's really fortuitous. Did she know what this was? I mean, could she tell you more about this flag?
No, she didn't know what it was, but she started reading the flag aloud for us.
Oh, cool. So what did it say?
Yeah, so along one side, in the biggest characters, was the name of a Japanese soldier from World War II, to whom the flag presumably belonged, and who it appeared must have been going off to war, because the messages around the sun were from people the flag bearer seemed to know, who were giving him like this big send-off. And I'm not going to lie, some of them wrote rather strong statements. So the most explicit was, "We have to kill British and Americans." But then there were also lines that were just sad, knowing what this soldier and others were about to go through. So, there was, "We hope you will protect our country. We have the strength to win. I hope we win this year." And one person also wrote, like, "I'm going to." But honestly, the most common phrase was just "good luck." Probably that was like a quarter to a third of the messages were just "good luck" or "good luck this year."
Wow.
Yeah, and it turns out that what we were looking at was something called, in Japanese, a Yosagaki Hinamaru, which means collection of writing around the sun. But in English, is known as a good luck flag. And it was part of a tradition very popular in Japan in the late 30s and early 40s of having people write personal messages on flags to servicemen about to go off overseas. And then they would actually carry this flag folded up on their person into battle.
Wow, good luck flag. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, neither had I.
And so, do we know exactly how this tradition of the good luck flag emerged?
That is an excellent question. No.
Boy, Joe, I have spent years and years trying to find that out.
So this is Rex Zeke. He is a founder of an organization called OBON Society, which is involved with good luck flags. More on that in a second. And he says most scholars chart the rise of these flags to the 1930s, when a lot of Japanese men were getting shipped off to fight in China. But exactly how the tradition started, no one knows.
As far as I can tell, at some point, somebody got out a brush and some ink, and they looked at their national flag and saw all that tempting white field all around that red area. And this became a fashion or a tradition, or it became instantly a thing. And everybody started doing it.
But one thing Rex really stressed, and I think this is very important to point out, is that most of these flags weren't nearly as militant as the one I saw in the museum. A lot of them do have messages about victory and country and being brave, but most of them were filled in with either just people's signatures and well wishes, or else these very intimate messages from loved ones and friends and neighbors. Because you have to understand, you really could write almost anything.
So there's no rules and regulation, or, there's no guideline. And anybody might think, this is the last time to see this man. You may not ever see him again. So it is very personal.
Keiko Zeke is Rex's partner and the co-founder of OBON Society. And she says people might sometimes put poetry on the flag, others put inside jokes. Priests from the local temple might write a favorite mantra.
I remember one entry where it was saying something like, I'll look after the farm until you get home, or I'll look after the animals till you get home.
So the soldier doesn't worry about at home while he's away.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that it can be anything.
Absolutely. And by the way, when Rex said everybody started doing it, he meant that more or less literally.
We estimate that between 1935 and 1945, the people of Japan created somewhere between 9 and 12 million of these flags.
Whoa.
Yeah. And one of the reasons there's so many of them is not only did virtually every soldier get a flag, he often got multiple flags from multiple institutions on multiple occasions.
And so he might go to war or leave home with one from his parents, one from the bank where he worked, and one from his baseball team.
Okay, so if there's millions of these flags, what happened to all of them? Where are they now?
Well, most of them are gone, at least in Japan. And that's because many of those soldiers never came home. So a lot of the flags were just lost forever. And many of the flags that did make it back to Japan might have been actually deliberately gotten rid of, because after the war, during the American occupation, certain Japanese symbols were temporarily banned. And that included the Hinamaru.
And so those soldiers who survived, who had these and went home, whether those flags would have been buried or burned or destroyed or kept, we really can't get a gauge on that.
But Keiko says that the result is that it was such a final ending to this tradition that most people in Japan today, if you show them one of these flags, they don't know what it is.
Yeah, they had no idea about Yosegaki Hinamaru and anything.
But it turns out there is at least one country where you can still find a lot of good luck flags. And that's the United States.
Huh. Okay, well, tell me what that is.
Well, it's kind of for an unsavory reason, but basically, in World War II, a ton of American soldiers were shipped off to the Pacific and fought in battles against a ton of Japanese soldiers. And when the Americans took personal items off of dead Japanese soldiers on the battlefield, you have to understand, the Americans all grew up reading books and watching movies where capturing an enemy flag was like a big deal.
But unbeknownst to them, there was this tradition in Japan, and so everybody on the battlefield had a flag somewhere underneath them.
That's really fascinating, grimly fascinating.
Yeah, and so all these U.S. servicemen just take all these flags back to the States. But crucially, in the U.S., these good luck flags are not destroyed.
Yeah, because they would just keep them, and then they'd be, end up in your, grandparents' attic or basement in Scranton or whatever.
Exactly. But this is where Rex and Keiko's OBON Society comes in. Because what they do is they work with families in the U.S. who have come into possession of one of these good luck flags, and often as a form of post-war healing and reconciliation, they help them return the flag to the family of the original flag bearer in Japan.
Oh, so if you're like the grandson of a World War II veteran like me and find one of these flags in your grandfather's attic, the OBON Society will actually find the grandchildren of the Japanese veteran that they belong to, and then they will like matchmake and send them that flag.
Exactly. And after starting out on their own more than a decade ago, Rex and Keiko say that today they have a team of about 14 people that specialize in sending back these flags.
And it took us, I think, 4 years to do the first one. And now we're doing 2 each week on the average.
Wow, 2 a week. I mean, so then how many have they successfully returned at this point?
Well, at this point, they gave me a rough estimate of about 400 total returns.
Wow.
And they say their success rate is, again, roughly speaking, maybe around 50%. Their fastest find was a few days. Their longest was 7 years. And then there are obviously ones that might take even longer, but they just don't know yet.
So you had mentioned that the biggest thing written on the flag was the name of the flag's owner. Is that enough to find the descendants?
And return the flag? No, not even close. There are a lot of names that are the equivalent of like John Smith. And so the only way to figure out which John Smith it belongs to is to figure out where it came from.
But something that is rarely seen on these flags is any geographical mention as to where it was created, which drives us nuts.
Yes, it's so personal. Everybody know each other. So if they write, they don't write the hometown's name.
And then that's what we spend so many hours trying to figure out is where did this come from?
This is a fascinating mystery. So what are the techniques for figuring where they come from?
Well, they actually asked me not to divulge too much of their process because they don't want people who aren't experts when they find these flags to try to do this themselves.
I guess that makes sense, yeah.
And another thing I should add is that Rex and Keiko will never urge anyone to hand over a flag. You have to come to them. And if instead you choose to keep it, they'll respect your decision no matter what it is.
You know, I think that this like flag return process sounds really heartfelt and great, but it's also, you know, these flags are part of military campaigns that are extremely violent and not the best chapter in Japan's history. Are they ever used politically to, you know, hearken back in a bad way to this period of time where Japan's imperial strength was at its height?
So I asked Rex and Keiko about that, and you know they really stress that when it comes to these good luck flags, they've never found that. What they've found is that the people they've worked with and returned these flags to in Japan really connect with them on a personal level, because these are festooned basically with these messages and the names of these family members. So much more than anything else, what it becomes is a memento from one single person's life, and this is what Keiko really stressed. Like, that was her big point.
When you read everything they are written, it is amazing. So many story you can learn and you can feel it from this spiritual object, because this is only one of the kind in the world.
So did they end up connecting you with someone who either found or received a flag?
They did.
My name is Koishi Noriko Koishi です。
So I got a hold of Noriko Koishi via translator just outside the town of Kobe in Kyogo Prefecture. Noriko is in her mid-80s, which means she really grew up during the war. And back then, it was just her and her mother and her father, Noriatsu Yamaguchi. And Noriatsu was an executive at a local ceramics factory. But Noriko says that her memories of him are very faint.
So her dad was a busy salaryman who worked very long hours. So by the time she wakes up, he'll be already gone to work and then come back after she fell asleep. Obviously, because of the war, there is not much of a memory aside from that.
So instead, what she actually remembers most vividly about her father is him leaving for the war. Because when she was about 9 years old, Noriatsu was drafted to go fight in the Philippines. And that was in 1944. And Noriko says he did not want to go.
Because, of course, by 1944, the whole country of Japan sort of knew that there won't be a victory. But obviously, nobody is going to say that out loud.
But the general thinking was that getting drafted at this point was basically a death sentence. So Noriko actually remembers that her mother began kind of frantically suggesting that they all maybe run away to the countryside so that her father could dodge the draft.
So her grandfather slapped her in the face, saying the consequences of you doing that will result to they won't be able to get any food from the government. Noriko won't be able to go to school. It will be a disgrace to the family. And she remembers that scene where her grandfather hit her mother.
That is an incredibly intense thing to remember.
Yeah, and also just remembering the way they were kind of locked into this reality, which was that he had to go. And so her other vivid memory from that time is this kind of distilled image of the last moment she saw him.
So she sent him off at the train station, and her dad was sort of on the deck of the train, and he was wearing this white glove and waving at her until the train made that curve and she couldn't see him anymore. And to this day, she still remembers that white glove in the distance waving at her.
And then he just never came home. And when Noriko was already 12 or 13, so well after the war ended, her mother finally received a letter in the mail from the government just saying, "We can confirm he died in the war." And that's it. And they never received any remains.
And so, since you're telling his story during this other story of good luck flags, presumably he was given a good luck flag. Did they know anything about that, the family?
Yeah, so Noriko says that there had, in fact, been a sending off ceremony for her father, which she had attended, in which she put her handprint, actually, on a good luck flag that he took with him.
Wow.
Yeah. But when I asked her if that ceremony meant anything to her at the time, or if she yearned to see the flag afterwards as the years went by, she was like, no.
Obviously, they do so many flags when her uncles also went to war. So this was, the 9th, 10th flag. So it became sort of a monotonous routine. So the answer is no. She did not even think for a second about these flags.
Wow. I mean, I guess it makes sense. And we talked about them being made over and over again for various people. Like you do it and, life moves on, even if you face tragedy.
Exactly.
So what I would like to hear at this point is that Noriko's good luck flag was found and we have her little handprint on it.
Well, kinda. A flag was found. And who first found it and how is itself a bit of a mystery.
Well, I actually didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything about his war experience.
So this is Dion Blazing. I got a hold of her where she lives in Florida. And the person she is talking about here is her late uncle, Neil Heward.
Otherwise known as Uncle Bud.
Uncle Bud, okay.
Yeah, and Dion, as a child growing up, spent vacations with her uncle and aunt in Michigan.
And the two of them, they didn't have children, so they doted all over us. And they had a house that was on a lake, and he always had a boat ready for us. I mean, he just wanted to play.
But she also knew that he had served in the war in the Pacific. And although she saw a lot of photos of him in uniform, what actually went on in the war was kind of like a no-go area.
So we have pictures of him in his uniform. We have pictures of him before he left. We have pictures of him as they were training to leave, yada, da. So I knew from pictures something about it, but they never talked about it. This was not a discussion that you had at the house.
The only thing Dion ever really learned, and even this was much later, was that Uncle Bud had actually been found very badly wounded and in a coma on a battlefield before returning to the States. And that battlefield had been in the Philippines. So fast forward to the year 2016, when Uncle Bud, at the age of 95, passes away. And Dion and the other family members are clearing out his things, including this crate of just like old stuff. that no one else wants.
So I opened it up and I pulled out this box.
And when she got back home and opened the box,
there was this white bag with this silk material in it. And I was like, what the heck is this? And out comes the flag.
And although she didn't know it at the time, what it was a good luck flag. And here, let me show it to you.
Wow, it's like pristine. It's like not faded at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's like time travel.
So as you've set this up, I'm expecting this to be Noriko's father's flag, but there's no handprint on it.
Well, here is where there is a tiny little twist in the story. Because Dion, after doing some Googling, figured out what kind of flag it was. She found OBON Society, and she decided that she wanted to find the flag's original family. And so she sent it to Rex and Keiko, and they started analyzing. And so, looking back at the flag, do you see the characters along the right-hand edge, the second to the right?
Yes.
So that is the name of a ceramics factory in the town of Kobe in Hyogo Prefecture, Japan.
So this is from his factory where he worked. This is like a flag from his coworker sending him off.
Yeah, he had a second flag, and this was it. So after telling Dion, hey, it could take years, Rex and Keiko called her like 2 months later.
And said, we found the family. And I was like, you're kidding. And they said, no, we're not. We found it. Are you still willing to allow us to send it back? And I said, okay, I really now have to think about this.
So she has this like one last chance to decide whether or not she views this as her property or theirs, really.
That's right. And at this point, she says she did actually hesitate.
And part of the reason is I really wasn't sure what the rest of my family would think about this, right? I was making this executive decision.
Is that because you didn't tell anyone else in your family, or did you check with them? What was the conversation?
I didn't check with them. I didn't check with them.
Why not?
Because I was afraid they'd say no.
This is another thing Rex and Keiko run into sometimes. People feel that the flag is more a memento of their loved one now than of this person back in Japan, and they want to keep it. But Dion said that wasn't so much her concern as it was that she thought her family might get upset about the idea of sending this flag back to the country that had caused Uncle Bud just so much pain and suffering.
But my thing is, I don't believe that individual soldiers should be held accountable for what their governments did or what they did on behalf of their governments. So I just decided I wasn't going to have that discussion. That's what it was. I just figured I would do it because I thought it needed to go back to that family, and if I got in trouble for it, I got in trouble for it.
And so off the flag went after 75 years to Noriko Koishi. And although OBON Society did contact her ahead of time to let her know that this was happening, once again, just like her father's death notice, it just came in the mail.
The post person brought it to her in an envelope, so nobody actually presented it to her. And her mother passed away 20 years ago. She's an only child, so she had no choice but to open it by herself. She worried if her dad's blood would be on it, or is it ripped, or is it soiled? So there was happy and worried at the same time.
And so when she did open it, and it was just in this perfect condition, she said she was just so, so thankful. So Noriko wrote Dion a thank you letter. And the letter honestly just describes in this incredible way what she, Noriko, did next and her thoughts and feelings far better than I could. And so I'll just let Dion read the letter, which I've abridged and edited a bit, but here it is.
Dear Mrs. Dion M. Blazing, I have unexpectedly received the flag of my father by virtue of your thoughtful offer in support of OBON Society. I felt this proved his strong desire to come home because his flag returned home just before his birthday on October 26th. However, my mother and his brothers, as well as his parents, all passed away. Now I am the only person who keeps my father's memory. I think it was very lucky your uncle found my father's flag in the middle of war and brought it to Michigan. I truly appreciate he preserved it very carefully, even though it must have been carried through the battlefield. I look at my father having returned home and wonder if he finds me acceptable to be his daughter. On the night his flag returned, almost as if my father rubbed his cheek against my cheek after a long time, I held the flag in the chest and fell into a shallow sleep, trying to control my emotion. Such reunion with my father would never have happened without your uncle's thoughtfulness and your arrangement. I announced the return of the flag to my late mother at the family grave. With your generous help, my father finally can rest in peace after 75 years long journey. Under COVID pandemic, please take care of yourself. With sincere gratitude, Noriko Koishi.
Wow, that's remarkable. That letter, I mean, it just shows what a fantastic person Noriko is, that she has the generosity of spirit to like thank her uncle for preserving it and getting it back to her somehow, even though, you know,
they fought on opposite sides of this war.
Even they fought, exactly. That's a great thing. And I think she got back so much more in that letter than she would ever had keeping that flag.
You know, Dion said more or less the same thing. And not only was Noriko incredibly gracious, it turns out, so was Dion's own family. Because when she finally did tell them what she had done, she says they weren't angry at all. Not with Dion and not with Noriko's father. They were just happy to see his flag return home.